All right, let's get started here. Got some people here that are going to try to help me out. So I've got some housekeeping stuff to get out of the way, but I want to try to make sure we can get Top Hat working throughout the semester. So we're going to start with that. So a couple things to try. Make sure you're only logged on to one device. So not both your phone and your laptop. Make sure you're only logged onto one device. Make sure, I guess I was wrong. Someone said help them. Got some bit information. Make sure you're on EduRoam, right? So make sure you're on EduRoam for your Wi-Fi. And then there was a third thing that helps. Am I forgetting something? EduRoam, log on to one. Oh, make sure you're using either Firefox or Chrome, right? One of those web browsers. So let's see what happens when I hit present here, right? So we're always going to have that same join code, right? So I'm going to hit start presentation and see if we can get these questions. And while they're helping us, let's try to keep it to a dull roar. That doesn't mean actually keep it. Hey, that doesn't mean actually keep it to a dull roar. That means be quiet, right? So let's try to be quiet so we can try to get them to help us and kind of try to get this working, all right? I know this is exciting things, right? So see if hopefully this question is popping up for you. How many of you are still having issues? So it looks like 170 of you at least are logged on, right? So are some of you able to answer? I can see some of you starting to get responses in, right? How many of you are not able to get a response in? Okay, leave your hand up and they can kind of at least see what's going on your screen. And then hopefully we can kind of get this troubleshooted, okay? Not for every one single person here today. We might not get a resolution, but at least we can start to see what the issues are, okay? Once again, if you aren't able to get on, get an answer in, leave your hand up. Looks like we're getting a good majority of us. 230 here at least are logged on, getting close to 100 answered. Now look, we can see. You're just kidding. How many of you are able to look at your answers? So how many of you can't even get logged on to the answers? Your watching. What do you want? How many of us aren't able to get out that video? Hands up, okay? How many of us aren't able to access any website? So you can't even go to like Instagram, okay? Those are still hands that it might be what. So how many are we getting? We're getting close. We're getting about 90%, at least in terms of being able to get logged on. Some of you probably still can't see the questions, so we've got about 220 of us answering. If you can see the question, don't worry about getting it right or wrong at this point. Just answer the question to see how high we can get this, okay? So if you can see the top hat question, just answer it so I can see that you are able to respond. Don't worry about going to give any correct points after class. I got something to kind of resolve. All right. So hopefully, I think we've got some information to them. We might do something a little bit later on in class. I'm going to close this out. Looks like we're getting, like I said, about 90% of us have gotten an answer in. So hopefully we can get kind of these last wrinkles worked out. I think it's a really useful tool for me to be able to use these in class, ask you questions immediately following us going over the material. I think it's going to help you out. So I appreciate your kind of understanding, your patience. I promise come up with something. For today's class, we likely won't be able to use it for points. So what I'm actually going to do is a little bit of a workaround. I'm going to actually go through some questions towards the end of the class that I was going to use. I'm going to create what looks like another assignment on Top Hat, which is just those 3 questions. So I still want to reward you for showing up in class today, right? So if you're here in class, you're going to know the answers to those questions because we're going to work through them at the end, right? So that'll be set to be, you can get on Top Hat and get that done. I'll put it up after class and put a link to Canvas there. So you just have to get on. You'll have 1 attempt at each one of those questions. Once again, if you're paying attention today, you should only need 1 attempt. You should know the answers, right? But that'll show up as a new assignment, and that just needs to be completed before we meet in class on Thursday. So that'll be our way I kind of replace today's participation points, and then hopefully moving forward, we can get some of these bugs worked out, okay? All right. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to go back to the slides here. A couple other things, just housekeeping I wanted to mention off the top. So getting some questions about that packback assignment. If you're looking at the packback assignment, your initial response is going to be, it's going to take a second. When you go to, okay, well, I guess mine's going to look a little bit different than yours. So go to our first packback. This ask a new question. I don't know why they call it a new question. That's going to be your first initial response to my guidepost, right? To those different articles, to the different questions I posed. By no means you have to answer every single question. And I think the reason why they call this ask a question is because in your response, it's generally helpful to create the discussion if at the very end, you kind of pose your own question about this topic. So that makes it easier for other students to respond to your response, right? So that's why they kind of have it as the ask a question button. You can think of it as post your response button, if that helps, okay? Then you'll do that once and then respond to 2 other students, kind of, initial prompts or initial responses as well, okay? All right. I put up an announcement, module 2. There was an issue with question 5 where I didn't anticipate the question not accepting different spellings of bicycle, extra zeros and the decimal points. I tried kind of going in and working with it, and I'm not going to lie to you, it was going to be worth more time or it wasn't worth the time. So I just regraded it and gave everybody credit for that part of the question. Okay. So you guys got a freebie on me a little bit because I'm a little bit lazy with that. Right. But ultimately, these quiz questions are meant, the points, they matter, obviously, but really getting them correct, understanding why they're correct, learning the material, that's really going to be the value in those quizzes because that's going to be reflected on your exam scores. And that's what's 65% of the overall grade in this class. Okay. Other than that, any questions for me before we really just dive into material here today? And I apologize. I'll try to shout. I don't know where the mic went. I think someone might have accidentally taken it, but I'll try to make sure that I shout and kind of loud enough. Can you guys hear me okay? Not okay. So, module 3. It's not that I dislike modules 1 and 2, but I get a lot more excited from here on out, right? So module 3, we're going to start talking about markets. So all market is, we're thinking about, there's a specific product, and we're going to have a bunch of people who want to buy that product and a bunch of people who are trying to sell it, okay? Now, we're going to talk about a kind of perfectly competitive market. That's what we're going to start out with, which is no one buyer or seller has any influence over the price. So what would kind of violate this? What market wouldn't this look like? Well, if we're talking about, I don't know, iPhones, right? There really is no true, I mean, you can buy other phones, but if you specifically want just an iPhone, you love all the features on it, there's only one producer of iPhones, right? That is one seller. They would have some influence over that price. When we think about perfectly competitive markets, it's a dumb example. I always use bottles of water, right? If I go to a gas station and I see 5 different brands of bottles of water, it's all the same to me, right? There's many, many producers, and they have to be a lot more competitive in terms of the price, right? So this is the idea of a perfectly competitive market. No one buyer or seller has any influence over the price, right? You think about another context, sometimes we have like one consumer where it's like there's one main purchaser of like a raw material. So we can't have that in this instance either, right? Lots of buyers, lots of sellers, okay? So we'll start out, this chapter is all perfect competition. Later on in the semester, we'll talk about monopolies, things like that, okay? So the first thing we need to know about in market is where does demand come from? So we've got kind of this thing, it gets a little bit tricky. Before we talk about demand, we'll talk about what we call quantity demand. So the quantity demand is just going to be how much is somebody willing to buy at a specific price. So how many bottles of water am I willing to buy if it costs $1? That would be my quantity demand at that price. Now the quantity demand can change. If they raise the price from $1 to $2, what's going to happen to how many I probably want to buy? It's going to decrease, right? As the price goes up, consumers are going to be less likely to want to buy as much, or that quantity demanded is going to decrease. So this law of demand tells us that there's this inverse relationship. As prices increase, holding everything else constant, right? There's other things that can change, but this is this idea of ceteris paribus, holding everything else constant. We just want to analyze the relationship between the price and the quantity demanded of a good. We know that's going to be an inverse relationship. Or as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, okay? I don't think that's too crazy yet. So this is all just different ways of kind of writing it. You can use kind of the shorthand with arrows. And for right now, we're going to assume demand is linear, right? It makes the math a lot easier for us. We won't really use anything other than linear curves this semester. If you want to go to intermediate micro, then you'll start to talk about, well, what if we have some curvature to demand, right? So what's driving this? I think, you know, it seems intuitive about if I increase the price, people want to buy less, but where it's coming from is 2 effects. The first is the substitution effect, okay? So the substitution effect says, okay, if the price of bottles of water goes up to like 100, it continues to increase, what do I start doing when I'm thirsty? Probably going to try to find other bottles. What if all water is $100? What do I start to drink? Tap water, right? Maybe if I'm at the gas station, I have to buy something. Maybe now I start buying Pepsi or I start buying tea, right? So this idea that even it doesn't have to be the exact same good, but there's a lot of other substitutes, right? If I just want something to drink, there's a lot of different things I can choose: water, pop, tea, etc. Right? So when I'm trying to do, you know, when I increase the price of a good, I'm going to substitute away from that good that is now relatively more expensive and be more likely to buy other products. So this substitution effect is part of what drives that inverse relationship. Now, the other effect is going to be our income effect. So if I have $10 in my pocket and, I go to the store and I just have the most, it's 90+ degrees, humidity. I know that I'm gonna need as many bottles of water as I can get. My demand is insanely high. Even if a bottle of water is $1 and I've got $10, I'm gonna buy 10. Well, what if they increase the price to $2? How many can I buy? I only have $10, I can only get 5. So the income effect is also going to be driving this inverse relationship, that as they increase the price of goods, I just can't buy as many, even if that's all I wanted to buy. Right? I can't go buy a Tesla because I don't have, the price is too high relative to my income, right? So these are kind of the two effects that are driving this law of demand. So the way that we'll typically depict demand, first we'll look at like a table, and then we'll get a nice graphical representation. So our demand schedule is just going to be a table that tells us the different prices and quantity demanded of a specific good. So here I chose what? Orange mocha frappuccinos, a great Zoolander reference. So here we've got our various prices, the quantity demanded at each one of those prices. Notice, as the price goes up, what's happening to the amount that this individual wants to buy? It's going down. It's this inverse relationship. We can then take each one of these points and plot them on a graph. We'll treat price as our y-axis, and then the quantity demanded we'll be looking at on our x-axis, okay? Excuse me. If I can get this to switch over, there we go. So I've got my demand schedule. I then want to kind of get a nice graphical representation of this. I'm just going to plot each one of these points, right? So I'm going to go ahead and plot, oh, nope, this one first, 0 and 12, right? The price of 0, I'd buy 12 of these drinks, right? Even if the price is 0, if I start to consume, enough frappuccinos like that, there's going to be some limit, right? I don't want to keep on going. So even if they were completely free to me, there is going to be a cost if I drink 12 of anything, right? In the sense of like, I'll get sick. Hopefully you're picking up what I'm kind of getting at there, right? And so then we just kind of continue. If they increase the price to $1, this person is willing to buy a little bit less, right? Both through the substitution and income effect. And then we kind of continue to plot these points. We get all of them, draw a line in between. This is going to be our demand curve. So demand is this entire curve. Quantity demanded is a single point on that curve, okay? So there's different quantity demanded at various prices, but this entire curve is going to be what we call the demand curve, okay? It's the whole combination of those prices and quantity demanded, okay? Any questions up to this point? It shouldn't be too bad. Yeah. Slow down. Yeah. What needs to be? So back here. So this is the idea that if the price of bottles of water goes up, I'm going to start to substitute away from that and buy other things to drink, right? That's all that substitution effect is saying. And then the income effect is just, even if I only want to buy one thing, let's say, I don't know, I love Sharpie markers and I'll spend all of my money on them. If you increase the price from like $1 to $100, I just can't buy as many. So that's the idea of the income effect. And both of those is saying that when the price goes higher, I'm going to be buying less of that good, right? This inverse relationship that we see for demand. Yep. All right. I'll try to be less excited. So anytime we have a graphical representation of something, a line has an equation behind it. Okay? So I can come up with mine now. I've got my demand schedule. I've got my demand kind of curve visual. What about what's behind the visual? The demand equation. So we're always going to keep demand linear, right? So you've probably seen in your math classes, the math people love to write an equation for a line like this, right? Y equals mx plus b. I don't know how they chose those letters to represent it. I just kind of start at the beginning of the alphabet, or at least economics does. So what is our y variable? What did I put in that y-axis? Price, right? Price is then going to be a function of, I've got some intercept, and our x was the quantity demanded of whatever good x we're looking at, right? So if you want to, you could also kind of write this as the quantity demanded. Usually once we start to actually look at examples, I'll write in, what the actual good is, right? The quantity demanded of what? Bottles of water, right? So X is just kind of a general form, and we put in whatever product we're looking at, okay? So I've got this equation for a line, right? If I think about when I'm plotting this, so quantity demanded, you can kind of write there on the x-axis. A is going to be the value that price would start out at, or think about it, it's going to be the price at which quantity demanded is 0, right? So my intercept is if the price, what would the price have to be for me to buy none of this good? Okay? Then as I decrease the price, what's happening to the amount that people want to buy? It should be going up, right? So I know that I have a downward sloping demand curve. What has to be true about the slope? It's always negative, right? So as I want to buy more of something, right, I would need the price to fall. So here's the reason why. Let's say we go back to my dumb example about mowing the lawn and I don't have any beer in my fridge, but my neighbor does, right? I'd be willing to pay up to $15, right, to get that first beer, right? So that was the idea that as soon as the price became $15, I was willing to buy that first beer from them, right? But for any price above that, right, I wasn't going to buy that unit, right? It didn't have as high of a marginal benefit to me. So as you lower the price, we said, what's happening to my marginal benefit as I consume more and more of something? It's decreasing, right? So that means if the value I'm getting from consuming more and more and more is decreasing, how much am I willing to pay? Each unit I buy, I'm willing to pay a little bit less than the one before. That's what this is telling us, right? Essentially, we can think about the demand curve is really just telling us the marginal benefit to consumers for each one of these different quantities. Okay? So we've got the law of diminishing marginal benefit or law of diminishing returns. That's exactly what's going on with our demand curve. We know that as people have more and more of something, they value each additional one less and less. They're willing to pay less and less money for it. So that you would have to decrease the price in order to convince them to buy, go from the 5th to the 6th, you have to decrease the price. Otherwise, they're going to stay there at 5 or any other 2 points you want to choose. Okay. Yeah. So this isn't going to be my total benefit, right? And you can think about, I'm willing to buy this. The reason why the price has to be lower is because my marginal benefit for that 5th unit is lower than that of the first. So we're assuming that people will buy up to whatever their marginal benefit is. So for this very first one, I'd be willing to pay a price of $15 because my marginal benefit of that first unit was 15. But once I get to buying, do I buy that 5th unit of this good? Well, it has a lot less value to me, right? The marginal benefit here might only be something like 7, in which case the price would have to be lower for me to buy it. Because if you keep the price up here at 15, the price is way above my marginal benefit for that 5th unit. So I wouldn't buy it. So the only way you can convince me to buy that 5th unit is if you lower the price. Is that okay? Any other questions on this idea before we keep moving here? So, you can think of this as quantity demanded. Typically, once I actually start using a specific good, I just write in the name of whatever good we're looking at for X. X is just kind of a general placeholder. Yep. All right. Any other questions? We're good up there? Okay. All right. So, excuse me. This is really, all the information that I kind of just already talked through, right? Our intercept is going to be the price at which demand is equal to 0. So if we go back, what price in this example would I need in order for there to be 0 quantity demanded? $6. That's my intercept. How do I find the slope of any line? Rise over run, change in y over change in x. Here, what's our y? Price. So it's the change in price between 2 points. So going from 6 to 5, divided by the change in the quantity demanded. Here, we're going from what? 0 to 2, right? Or we look here, 0 to 2. So I have the change in y was 1, change in x was 2, -1/2, right? And we always have a negative slope because we have a downward sloping demand curve here, right? So we just grabbed those values from our graph, right? We looked at that intercept. What was the price at which 0 was demanded, or the quantity demanded was equal to 0? And then as I want to buy an additional, or if I'm trying to convince someone to buy an additional unit, how much do I need to decrease the price in order to convince them to buy that? So if we go back here, notice if I want them to buy that very first unit, I've got to decrease the price from 6 to, it looks like, about $5.50. That's exactly what my slope was saying. My slope was -1/2. That's saying that if I want to convince this consumer to buy one more unit of good X, I've got to lower the price by 50 cents or half a dollar. Okay. Any other questions on this idea before we? Yeah. So the slope won't be the marginal benefit. The actual curve is telling me the marginal benefit of every single quantity. So it reflects whatever, like if I'm looking at, like to my drawing earlier, if I'm looking at the very first unit, the point that I'm at on my demand curve, if I then go over to price, that's the marginal benefit. The marginal benefit of that first unit was 15. If I'm looking at the 5th unit, wherever I'm at on that demand curve, the marginal benefit is reflected by the price, right? Because I'm willing to buy it, as soon as that price hits exactly to be equal to my marginal benefit, I'll buy up to that point. Yep. But you ask a good question. The slope, and I probably won't push you guys this far, but the slope is kind of related to marginal benefit. Can anyone kind of anticipate how? So if this demand curve represents marginal benefit, my slope is telling me how quickly the marginal benefit is decreasing, right? It's kind of like the rate of change of my marginal benefit. Every additional unit I buy here, the marginal benefit was falling by 50 cents. Right? Same idea. I would have to charge 50 cents less to get them to buy that because that was the same amount that their marginal benefit was decreasing. Okay. Any other questions here before? Yeah.
So the slide says the slope is the dimension of how it's going to be demanded. Would it be an increase in your price but shallow by, like, in this case, by 0.5? What did you increase your quantity?
So the slope is telling me that if I lower the price, what's happening to quantity demanded? It's going up. One of those is negative, one of those is positive. So if I do rise over run, negative over a positive is a negative value. My slope will always be negative. As I lower the price, that's a decrease. If price decreases, quantity demanded will go up. So the slope of that curve will be negative, right? Yeah. Am I not understand what you're asking?
No, I'm just saying, I guess, because so.
I think that what you're getting at is it's kind of counterintuitive that this is a negative value because as I'm lowering the price, I'm buying more. But remember, where did you start? You're lowering the price. So when you lower the price by $1, right, your change in Y is what? -1. And then as you lower the price by $1, people will buy more. So you're going to have some positive value there. So your slope will always be negative.
The slope is negative. When you go down in price, then your quantity demand is increased.
Correct.
But there it says the quantity demanded would be a decrease.
So the price change that would cause a 1 unit. So you can go in either direction, right? The slope, I could also think about it if I want to move up $1. So price increases would tell us how much, right? You can go in either direction. Yeah, yeah. I understand what you're saying now. All right. Any other questions? We'll keep moving here. We got a lot to get through, so we're going to try to make sure I keep us on schedule. Oh, we're doing pretty good. All right. So I've already kind of mentioned this, right? But that demand curve reflects to us marginal benefits, okay? So I showed you the visual of if I go to a certain quantity demanded, I go up to that demand curve, and that price would also reflect what that marginal benefit was. So how do I find the different marginal benefits of different quantities, right? Well, all I'm going to do is take this equation, and if I plug in the quantity I'm interested in finding the marginal benefit of, the price essentially is reflecting that marginal benefit. So I can think of this as, if I've got, so here was my equation from the example. If I wanted to know the marginal benefit of the first unit, essentially that price is the same as, it's synonymous with my marginal benefit. Okay? because I know that people will be willing to pay up to the point where the price is equal to their marginal benefit. So what would the marginal benefit be for that very first unit? All I do is plug a 1 in. 6 minus 0.5, the marginal benefit of that first unit would be 5.5, right? So the marginal benefit of the first unit, 5.5. What about the marginal benefit of the second unit? Well, what do I do there? All I have to do is plug in that quantity demanded of 2, and this equation should tell me the marginal benefit of the second. So I plug it in, 6 minus 0.5 times 2 is 5. And then I kind of just continue this process. I'd be seeing that as I buy 1 additional unit, that marginal benefit is declining by whatever that slope is, right? As I buy more and more, my marginal benefit is going down by whatever that slope value is, in this case, 0.5. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay? So it's not terrible. So, we just start plugging in different quantities. We can get the different marginal benefits. I only did 2 of them, right? You could do, all 12 if you really wanted to there. So we've already talked about this demand curve is decreasing. If the demand curve reflects marginal benefits, this is consistent with what we've been saying, that as people buy more of something, the marginal benefit of each additional unit is declining, right? So we see this pop up again, this law of diminishing returns or this diminishing marginal benefit, okay? Now, if we then kind of take this, right, at this point, we just talked about, like, I've tried to put this in context of one person, it's individual demand, right? But we know in an economy, there's a lot more than one person, right? So if we think about the entire economy, maybe we have 2 people, right? Two people who want to buy these orange mocha frappuccinos. So all we do to get market demand is take each person's quantity demanded, and that all the various prices, we just add these up. So we know that if the price was $6, Zoolander would demand 0, Ken demands 5. The total market demand at a price of $6 would be 5. And then what if the price was $5? Well, Zoolander's demanding 2, Ken's demanding 6. Our total market demand would be 8. All we're doing to get market demand there is just adding up every single individual's quantity demanded at the different prices. I don't think that's too crazy, right? So all we're doing is adding up the individuals in our economy of every single demand curve to get overall market demand, okay? So market demand, you can kind of think about it as we all have different marginal benefits to consuming things. So when I'm adding those up, this isn't perfect, but I'm kind of getting like an average, like how much on average each person is going to benefit from this, kind of added up together, right? So, excuse me. So we've got market demand now. It's still, if every individual's demand curve is downward sloping, what's going to be true about market demand? It's also downward sloping, right? We're just adding these up. If at every single price, as I increase the price, the quantity demanded is falling, that's also going to be true about my market demand. So this isn't too crazy of an idea, I don't think. Any questions on this before we keep moving here? So now that we have market demand, right, we want to think about things that might shift this demand curve, right? So we have this market demand, right? It looks, adding up every individual's demand curve. That was just telling us the relationship for that good between the price of that good and the quantity demanded, holding everything else constant. But there's a lot of other things that can change, and a lot of other things that can change that we know are going to impact how much people want to buy of certain goods. So this idea of the ceteris paribus, holding other things equal, we're now going to think about, well, what are those other things that we were holding constant that could change, right? So we'll kind of give you a nice graphical representation of this. We're just thinking about things that are not going to move us to different points on the demand curve, but shift the entire curve. So I've got some drawings in the slides, but I think I can recreate them in a different way that will be helpful the first time you see those. So let's say I'm looking at some product and I'm thinking about, I've got the relationship for this product between price and quantity demanded, okay? So here's my kind of old demand curve. So if I were just to see a change in the price of this good, so let's say I'm thinking about those orange mocha frappuccinos, but if the price of them goes down, I'm going to move to a different point on the market demand curve. I'm moving to a different, you can kind of think about this as here was my first quantity demanded. Here's my new quantity demanded. I'm just moving to a different point on that same curve because that curve is telling me the relationship between the price of that good and the quantity demanded of that good. Now, let's think about like most things, right? So clothing, food. If you have more money, right? If you see an increase in income, what do you think is likely going to happen to your demand for most products? It's going to go up, right? So as we have more income for most goods, things that we end up calling, and we'll go into it deeper in here in a second, normal goods, at every single price, if I now have more money, I might be willing to buy more of that good, right? So at every single price, because I have more income, it doesn't matter what the price is, I'd be willing to buy a higher amount. So I'm going to try to draw this as best I can too. It shouldn't change the slope of my demand curve. It's just going to shift it out. Now, because once we get to supply, it can get a little bit confusing. I don't like to use up and down. That terminology will confuse you a little bit once we get to supply. I understand that it looks like it's moving up, and it is, but once we get to supply, upward movements won't be increases, and it becomes a little confusing. So we're going to stick with this terminology of anytime we see an increase in demand, we can think of this as a rightward shift, right? These rightward shifts are going to be increases in demand. Another way to kind of remember this, if your demand curve is shifting away from this 0 point, that's an increase, right? Now, what if all of a sudden I don't have a lot of money, I see a decrease in my income? What might happen to the amount that I demand of most products? Can't buy as much, right? That income effect is going to take over, and I'm going to buy less. So here, if I saw a decrease in demand at every single price, I'm going to have a decrease in the quantity demanded. And I could do that at every single price here. I can kind of think about this we'll call this new, not squared, but 2, just kind of indicating this is a different demand curve. So this leftward shift represented a decrease in demand. Right? So rightward shifts will be increases in demand. Leftward shifts will be decreases in demand. Okay. And I use the example of income, but we have a lot of other things that can cause these shifts. Okay. Any questions on this before I keep moving? And I try to use different colors so that we don't have to get too lost in kind of, calling these different things. You can kind of see here was my decrease, blue, red was my increase. Okay. We're good up there. Any questions? So we'll start to talk about these various things that can shift demand. Here, like I said, I kind of got them on separate graphs. So if you want to go back to the slides, you can kind of get a different visual. It's really the same thing I just worked through. It doesn't show like at every single price that it's going down. So I just thought that might be something, first look at it might make a little more sense. But here we've got our rightward increase in demand, leftward shift decrease. Okay. So a real easy one that we can think about what's going to change market demand is if I see an increase in the number of buyers. So in my example, when I first started out, I only had one person, Zoolander. That individual demand curve is going to be much lower than when I start to add in more individuals, right? My market demand will increase as I have more buyers. So in general, we think about, at any given price, there's now going to be more people who want to buy this good. And so increasing the number of buyers will increase demand. This is going to be, mostly, I think we frame this usually as like population growth is an easy way to think about that. As your population grows, market demand for most products is going to be increasing, right? Now, like here in our example, we only had 2. If we had a third person, well, now our market demand is even higher, right? It shifts even more to the right. So in practice, like the US, I think we've fallen below 2.0 for that birth rate. So we're not replacing ourselves. So we're actually seeing population decline. I know Japan's like really, really low. And they've seen population decline over like the past couple of decades. So they're actually seeing a decrease in population. What's happening to demand for products in those countries? It's decreasing as a result of this change, right? There's other things that are changing as well. But if we're just talking about only this changing, decreases in population, we would expect to see decreases in demand. Now, even if I have that going on, why are there plenty of companies in the US who are seeing large increases in their market demand? It's a major in Kelly. What do you do to try to get more consumers? Market, right? I can't tell you how many things I've bought because Instagram ads have shown me something and I could use that in my life, right? So we try to increase the number of buyers for our product, we can increase the demand, okay? So, what does this look like? At every single price, if I add in an additional buyer, the market demand will be whatever it was before, but now there's this third person who would also be willing to buy some. And that's going to be true at every single price, right? So at every single price, I have an additional buyer. There's going to be someone who's willing to buy a certain amount of that good. We now get that added in to market demand. So as we add in more individuals, our market demand curve just keeps shifting more and more to the right, okay? Any questions on this before we keep moving? All right. Okay. So, I already mentioned this one a little bit, so we'll kind of go quick through the first part because I've already described it. But for most goods, we think of increases in income would increase demand, right? So these are going to be clothing, computers. I put new cars up here. Most goods that you probably buy, well, I shouldn't say that, you're college students. I think that most goods we think of, if we have more income, we would buy more of them. But there are these goods that are inferior goods, and their income and demand work in opposite directions. So inferior goods would be things like ramen noodles, right? Public transportation, things that if you have more money, you stop buying, right? I couldn't tell you, well, I have had them somewhat recently, but I don't buy ramen noodles near at the rate as I did when I was in college, right? So as you have more income, there's going to be certain goods that we call inferior goods that you actually buy less of them. I always say, new and used cars are a good way to think about this. As I have more and more income, I'm more likely to buy a new car. They're moving, income and demand are moving in the same direction. If I don't have any money, when I was in college, my demand for new cars was 0. My demand for used cars was high, right? So used versus new, that's a good way to think about normal versus inferior goods, right? Because everybody, it's hard when I start to give examples, and I try to give ones that are kind of universal. But like for some people, they're like, well, ramen noodles aren't an inferior good to me. I love them. I could be a millionaire. I eat them. Okay, but you get the example, right? It's going to be something that if you had more money, you would buy less of. So anytime I'm running through these examples, think of something that's true for you, right? What's something maybe you buy if you didn't have a lot of income that if you all of a sudden became a millionaire, you wouldn't buy them. That's an inferior good. Make an example that makes sense to you for that. Like I said, the new used car one always, I think, is pretty universal. But yeah, so here we've got them actually moving in opposite directions. Yeah, so if we have these shifts, I think I heard your question. So if I get it wrong, let me know, but I think I heard it. So you're asking about when I have these shifts, is quantity demanded changing, right? So inherently, if I have an old demand curve, when I see that shift or that increase, what's happening at every single price? Quantity demanded at every single price is increasing, right? So when we have these shifts in our demand curve, it's changing quantity demanded at every single price. If we see a change just in the price of a good, we are just seeing a movement along this curve to a new quantity demanded point. But not every, the quantity demanded at every price has actually stayed the same. It's these other things like income, when they change, we see the quantity demanded change at every price, right? An entire shift of that curve. Is that what you were getting at? Okay. Yeah. So in all the examples we're going to do, no. In theory, we're actually going to talk a little bit more about elasticity and things kind of somewhat related to slope in module 4. Yep. Right now, parallel shifts. Yep. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So, gets a paycheck, no longer is buying natty ice, right? So whatever good kind of connects with you, try to think of that as your inferior good example, okay? All right. This one, we've got 2 different types of related goods that we're going to kind of talk through, and I'll write kind of a shorthand that I think will help. Let's say we have substitute goods. So these are goods I can use in replacement of each other. I always use the example of like just branded goods because to me, I don't know, cola is cola, right? I could buy Pepsi or Coke. To me, it's all the same, right? So if I have two goods that can be substitutes of each other, if all of a sudden you go to the store, you go to Kroger tomorrow, and a 2 liter of Coke is $20, but you really wanted, some type of soda product or some type of dark cola product. So let's just make it easy. You're choosing either Pepsi or Coke. Coke all of a sudden is $20 for 2 liter. What do you think happens to the demand for Pepsi? Goes way up, right? So if the price of a substitute good goes up, the good you're thinking about that it's a substitute for, it's actually now like relatively cheaper. More people are going to want to substitute away and buy that good, right? So I always use Pepsi, Coke, laptop and desktop computers. There was a time, believe it or not, where laptop computers were significantly more expensive than a desktop. And so a lot of people were actually choosing a desktop computer. As those laptops get cheaper and cheaper, what happened to the demand for desktops? So there, laptops, the price was falling. So more people are likely to buy laptops than desktops. That actually caused the demand for desktop computers to go down. You think about it right now, another good example that I see is like in the lab recently, electric cars. Electric vehicles used to be, especially the batteries for them. If you ever look at it's getting better now, but I remember I thought about getting one. And if you have to replace the battery, at one point in time, I think this would have been what 7 or 8 years ago. I was looking at it. Some of them are like $5,000-$6,000 to replace the battery if something goes wrong. It's not that anymore. I think it's a lot closer to like 1,500 or 2,000. Obviously, depending on what vehicle you're looking at. But so as the price of those electric vehicles is kind of falling, right? What's happening to demand for gas-powered vehicles? It's going down, right? Electric vehicles are becoming more and more of an attractive option. So here we've got the price of a good. This was the idea that if the price of Coke goes way up, what's happening to the demand for Pepsi? It's going up. They're moving in the same direction, right? Because people don't want to buy Coke anymore if it's $20 for a 2 liter. They'll start substituting away and be more likely to want to purchase Pepsi. Okay. Any questions on this before we keep moving? Okay. So the same thing holds if I had a decrease in the price of Coke. What happens to the demand for Pepsi? It's going to start to go down, right? People are going to substitute away from Pepsi and buy more of the good that's becoming relatively cheaper. Okay. The other type of good, and I've got this in the slides, but we call them complementary goods. So I don't know, dumb examples that you'll see in textbooks are like peanut butter and jelly and things that you use together. This is a dumb example as well, admittingly, but it makes sense. I think you'll see why it helps make sense. So let's say I've got the price of AAA batteries, right? And I'm not using it today because I left my thing in another classroom, but I usually have, I'd like to use, if I can, so I can move around more, this clicker, right? This clicker, my demand for this clicker, right, is impacted by how much the batteries cost to operate it. Because without the batteries, this thing does nothing, right? So what happens if the price of batteries skyrockets to $100? What do you think happens to my demand for that clicker? I don't want the damn thing, right? There's no way. It's way too expensive because I have to use these two goods together, right? So batteries, I think, is probably one of the better examples. So here we've got, for complementary goods, these things are actually working in opposite directions. And then vice versa. We can think about like the electric car. As the price of those replacement batteries is falling, what's happening to the demand for electric vehicles? Well, if the batteries that they need are starting to go down, they become more attractive options to people. We see the demand increase. Okay? So complementary goods, we have kind of this inverse relationship between the price of the substitute good and then the good that we're looking at. Yeah, somewhere over here. Okay. Any other questions on this before we keep moving here? Okay. So, what, I have some other, gasoline, SUVs. So things that get really bad gas mileage when the price of gasoline starts going up. I remember when I bought my car, diesel was cheaper than unleaded. So it's a diesel car by Volkswagen. that influenced my demand for that product. Right? Gas was cheaper, and so I was more likely to buy, or sorry, diesel was cheaper, so I was more likely to buy a vehicle that used diesel fuel. So expectations will be the next things that can change. So we've got two different types of expectations. The first, we really already kind of talked about this, but it's going to be income expectations. So just to kind of jump the gun, if I think that I'm going to have more income tomorrow, let's say at the end of the week, what might happen to my current consumption today of normal goods? I'm going to buy more, right? In fact, we see people do this all the time. People, what are you doing with student loans, right? You expect to have higher income when you leave here. Excuse me. So, you want to buy things now. You want to increase your demand for normal goods because you're going to hopefully be able to pay it off down the road, right? So this is the idea of income expectations will change current spending habits. If I know that I might not be getting as much money in the future, so let's say I think there's going to be an economic downturn, what might I start doing? Tightening my belt a little bit. Stop buying as many products today because I know that, in the next year, my income could decrease, right? The economy could be going down. So economic downturns quite often lead to what? Increases or decreases in current demand? Yeah, decreases, right? For normal goods, right? Because what's going to be true if I have income expectations, as I have it here? Let's say we're thinking about inferior goods. If I think that I'm going to have less money in the future, what's going to happen to my current consumption of inferior goods? I'm actually going to buy more of them, right? And then normal goods, right? Or sorry, inferior goods. If I expect to have more income in the future, I'm less likely to buy inferior goods right now, right? You might have the same income as people who aren't in college, but you're probably not buying quite as many inferior goods because, once again, you expect higher income in the future. Okay. Any questions on that? Like I said, it's really the exact same relationship. It's just now we're talking about, instead of actual changes in income, it's expected changes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so we're talking about price changes in complementary goods. We're assuming that the other goods price stays the same. So when I said there was a change in the price of Coke, I was assuming the price of Pepsi hasn't changed. Right? It's just, there's no change. We're not moving to a different point. It's just a change in the price of that substitute or that complementary good. Yep. Yeah. Typically, the inferior goods tend to be things that are a smaller portion of your income, lower quality items. That was my whole used versus new cars. So yeah. Any other questions before we keep moving here? All right. So price expectations. If I expect prices to be higher tomorrow, so let's say this happens all the time. But you'll see a report or something come out that gasoline is going to be 50 cents higher tomorrow. So what does everybody do today? Yeah, what happened to current demand? Went way up, right? So if we have higher expected prices in the future, this one kind of seems kind of weird, but I actually buy more today because if I go fill up today, I'm going to spend less money than if I go tomorrow, right? So here with price expectations, oops, sorry, I didn't want to switch there. There we go. So if I expect higher prices in the future, what happens to current demand actually goes up, right? Because I want to buy it today when it's cheap. If I expect that prices are going to be lower in the future, what's going to happen to my current demand of the product? If I think that gas is going to be 50 cents cheaper tomorrow, what do I do today? Try not to use any gas and need to fill up my car, right? Or maybe I get a gallon and hold off so I can fill up tomorrow. So there, if I expect prices are going to be lower tomorrow, actually decreases my current demand. I want to try to hold off and buy it when the price is going to be low. So this is income and price expectations. And all of these increases, decreases in demand, they all are drawn the exact same way. The way we were drawing those shifts earlier, it's all going to be the same. So it's more about understanding these relationships and then being able to draw that rightward shift in demand for an increase, leftward shift for demand decrease. Okay. Questions on this before we keep going? Got a couple other things. One of them, probably should have had these slides in a different order, but it's kind of our catch-all category. So tastes and preferences. This is something that's just we don't talk much about it because it's really hard to predict, right? So things like pet rocks were a thing in the 70s, like people actually paid for them. Fidget spinners, right? And you guys are, old enough, it wasn't that long ago. Why, right? Why was that a thing? We don't know. These tastes and preferences can sometimes shift demand for products, and it's really no rhyme or reason, right? So this is kind of our catch-all category for things that we can't explain, basically. We do have one more category, right? Which is usually from the government. So I'll talk about it really just from a government perspective, and I'll try to give you some examples of non-government actions that would result in this. But taxes and subsidies, right? So taxes are going to decrease demand. So I'm going to try to, I've got a thing in here, but it's kind of foreshadow. I'll use some easier numbers, I think. Let's say I'm going to go out and buy a used car, right? Let's say I find one, obviously something might not make sense. This would be a really bad car, but there's some out there like this. Let's say it's $1,000, right? So I find this car at $1,000. My marginal benefit from owning that car was $1,000, so I would be willing to buy it for $1,000. Right? My demand, right, at that price, I would have bought that car. The supply and demand was one then. What happens though if there's sales tax on that car? Just to make the numbers easy, what if it's 10%? Well, then what am I actually going to have to pay for that car? Not just $1,000, but $1,100. My marginal benefit's still $1,000. Am I going to choose to buy that vehicle? No. I'm going to have to go find something that's a little bit cheaper because essentially that tax, right, is an additional cost to me as a consumer. Or another way you can think about it as it's going to represent like a decrease in my marginal benefit. Because now if I buy that good, I get whatever my marginal benefit was before, but then minus this amount of tax I have to pay. So I think I've got some examples here. You can think about if I had to pay $20 for a good, now there's a 5% tax on it. I'm no longer willing to buy that good for $20 because then the total cost would be $25 to me. The price of that good would have to fall to 15 so that additional tax, okay, now the total I'm paying is 20. That was my marginal benefit. Excuse me. So these taxes are going to cause a decrease in our consumers' demand curve. Sales tax is probably the easiest one to think about, an everyday tax that we see on consumers, right? Any questions on this before we keep? So increases in taxes, decreases in our demand curve. What's the opposite of a tax? So I don't know how many of you have, so we can always find new demand will be kind of whatever our old demand was minus the value of that tax, right? So we'll get into this into later modules, but we can actually determine what the size of that shift is, and the size of that shift in our demand curve will just be the value of that tax. Okay? We won't use that for another couple modules though. Subsidies, right? So subsidies are going to work the exact opposite of taxes and actually cause an increase in demand. So what does this look like? The government will sometimes have you guys are, probably not homeowners, but they send you these pamphlets all the time about if you put solar panels on the top of your house, the government will give you some money, right? Or I think there's actually like tax credits if I buy an electric vehicle, I get a certain amount of money off my taxes. They're essentially subsidizing. They're trying to give me some money to get me to use or buy these products, right? So anytime we have a subsidy, well, now when I buy that electric vehicle, I get the same marginal benefit as I did before, but now I get that marginal benefit plus some additional money back from the government, right? I get an additional marginal benefit. So I would actually be willing to pay a little bit higher for that electric vehicle now, right? So I'm getting this additional benefit from the government. Another way we see this, like not a government example, because a lot of subsidies are for producers, which we'll have a little bit of time to talk about supply I think here today, but mostly we'll start out with that next class. Anytime you have like a coupon where it's like spend $50 and get $10 back, right? If you're just thinking about one specific good, that's essentially a subsidy, right? Because you now know if you buy, spend $50, you're not actually spending $50, you're only spending $40, right? They gave you 50 and then they took 10 off. So these subsidies are going to make it such that the same price, right, now actually results in me having an even higher marginal benefit, right? I'm paying whatever the price was, but I'm getting this additional amount of money from the government, right, or the coupon. So inflation in terms of like, So we're not necessarily baking inflation into like any of these different topics we're talking about. If you want to think about inflation, which category would that kind of fall under? Macro, but also, what's one thing we talked about today? What does inflation do? It makes your income expectations, right? Because if you think there's going to be inflation, you think that your same amount of money you have in your pocket today is going to be worth less in the future. So it's really worth the same way as like an income expectation, a lower income expectation, decreasing. Is that? Any other questions before we keep moving here? So there's educational subsidies as well. So a lot of you probably have some of this, like Pell Grants and things like that. You don't think of it that way, but it really does in a way, like you're getting some additional money back from attending college, right? So you're paying whatever you're paying, you're getting some back, right? We'll talk more about like subsidies. We generally think about, oh, it's going to increase demand. We're seeing more people buy that good. Taxes, decrease demand, you see fewer people buying that good. So here's kind of a summary of all the different things that we talked about. Which ones would cause increases in demand and which one would cause decreases in demand. Right, so this is going to have a nice summary slide to go to. Might be a good one maybe for this week's quiz to kind of have in front of you. But if there's no more questions here, I'm going to kind of transition us over to supply for a little bit. Okay. And I'll try to save 5 minutes at the end. So we can talk about the exact same thing with quantity supplied as we did with quantity demanded. It's just everything kind of works in an opposite direction because we now, and I think demand's easier to think about because like we're all consumers. We all buy things. Not many of us have like our own companies, right? And so when we talk about suppliers, we're thinking about people who are producing goods. So maybe think of it now, we're transitioning over from the individual to what would companies do, right? So if I'm selling a product, if the price of that product goes up, what's going to be true about the quantity supplied? If I can sell it for more money, am I going to be willing to supply more or less of it? More, right? So it's going to be, we've talked about this a little bit already. So I'm trying to relate it to old stuff we've talked about. When we think about a supply curve, now I've got my quantity supplied and my price. If I want to graph out that relationship, as the price goes up, we said, are they going to want to supply more or less? They're going to want to supply more. So our supply curve is upward sloping, right? It's always going to have a positive slope. It also represents the marginal cost to the producers. So think about, what did we say is true about marginal costs, like with the production possibilities curve? As I start to produce more of something, what's happening to my cost? It's increasing, right? The very first unit, I use all my most efficient materials, my most efficient workers to get that very first unit. And so I'd be willing to sell it at a pretty low price because my marginal cost is relatively low. But what about that second unit? Sorry, I should make this bigger. What about that second unit? Well, now I'm not relying on my best worker. I'm relying on my second best worker. They're not quite as efficient. I'm not using the most efficient raw materials. I've already used those to make the first. And so my marginal cost to that second unit is going to be a little bit higher. And so I would no longer produce that second unit if the price is down here. I would need the price to be a little bit higher to supply that second unit. So this is kind of the relationship between price and quantity supplied. They're moving in the same direction. Yeah. So maybe the worker example, if you're thinking about you're paying your workers a different amount, let's assume I'm paying all my workers the same and that just some of them are better than others, right? So like this is a good example for like fast food. Like most of the workers are getting paid the exact same. There's some that are going to be a lot more productive and a lot more efficient than others. But you're right, if we wanted to make it complicated, we would talk about different skills of workers and then it's a little more, but for the sake of this example, if you want to think about the labor like aspect of it, you're thinking about, I'm paying these workers the exact same. It's just that's, I'm using them, I'm hiring the most efficient one first, and then the next most, and et cetera. Okay. Any other questions on this idea before we keep moving? So we've got, yeah. So this is just the price of the good on the market. So when we look at a good, if you go out and look at a bottle of water and it's $1, Well, that price is $1 to the consumer, but it's also the price the seller is selling it for. They're the same thing, right? Whatever that, like, think about it as it's like a sticker price you see when you go to the store. That good is being sold for that amount of money. That's how much the producer is selling it for. That's also how much the consumer is buying it for. Does that answer your question? All right. So we've got this law of supply tells us that instead of moving in opposite directions like with demand, price and quantity supplied have a direct relationship. They move in the same direction, right? Holding everything else constant. Once again, we're going to have a lot of other things that can change other than the price of a good that are then going to cause shifts in supply. Okay? So just like a demand schedule, we have a supply schedule. So I go back to my Zoolander example where now I'm thinking about Starbucks maybe starts selling these drinks. If the price is zero, how many do they want to supply to the market? Zero, right? Right. I can't make any money. Like you know, there's I'm gonna have some marginal cost. So if I can't get any money back from, I'm not going to produce anything. But then as I can sell these for higher and higher prices, I'm willing to supply more and more to the market, right? So we've got our demand schedule. We also have our supply schedule. What can we do next? Take the supply schedule, graph it out, and get our supply curve, right? So I just go through, graph each one of these points. So 0, 0, 1, 3, 2, 6, plot all these points, draw that line in between them. Now I've got my supply curve. So I've got an increase in supply curve here. It's just taking those points on my supply schedule and kind of making a nice visual representation. Now this one's kind of an easy one, but if I've got a curve, I also have a supply slope or equation, right? So here, what would the intercept for my supply equation be? Yeah, hits that y-axis at 0. What's my slope going to be? Well, it looks like the change in y is going from 0 to 1. The quantity supplied is changing, going from 0 to 3. So the change in price on my y variable, divided by the change in x, 3, which is my kind of x variable here, I've got a slope of 1/3, right? So we still calculate the slope the exact same way, just now for a supply curve, it's going to be positive, right? But we can grab that intercept, just looking at that visual, or our intercept is going to be the price at which 0 is supplied. Just like for our demand curve, it was the price at which 0 is demanded. That's our intercept. And then our slope is, as we want to see one additional unit produced and sold on the market or supplied to the market, what is the price increase I would need to convince this producer to produce one more unit? Just like before we said, to convince the consumer to buy one more unit, how much would we have to lower the price? So just working in opposite directions now. Now to convince a producer to supply this good, how much would we have to increase the price? That's what our slope is. Okay. So same kind of linear equation. We're going to keep it linear. We're not going to go any further than that in this class. So we've got a linear supply curve and our linear demand curve. Okay. Like I said, this shouldn't be too bad after we kind of went through demand. It's really very, very similar with supply, right? All the same kind of concepts. So I already jumped the gun on this, and when I drew it out, I kind of already told you that supply curve, just like the demand curve reflected marginal benefits, the supply curve is reflecting to us marginal costs, right? Essentially, it's saying if the price ever gets to this value, then this company or this producer would be willing to supply this number of units, right? But until the price gets to that point, it must have been that the price was below their marginal cost. Well, here it gets kind of tricky. So price to the producer is actually a good thing, right? When we think about consumers, we're thinking about, well, here's my marginal benefit. As long as the price is below it, I'll continue to buy the good. Well, for a producer, my marginal benefit for a producer is actually the price of the good, right? How much I'm selling it for. And the thing that's changing is the marginal cost, right? As they produce more and more, that marginal cost is increasing. Right? So they're willing to supply to the market as long as their marginal cost is less than or equal to that price. And they'll supply up to the point where they are exactly equal, right? We would say they're indifferent at that point. Let me think if there's anything else I want to say here. Oh, we can actually calculate what these marginal costs are. So just like with where I'm at, okay, I'll finish up with this. It's kind of easy with this one. So here we have our supply equation. If I wanted to know the marginal cost, that's reflected by the price for my supply equation. So just like marginal benefit for our quantity demanded, I'm saying quantity demanded and then trying to write it at the same time. My quantity supplied, right? So if I wanted to know the marginal cost of that, say, fourth unit, what am I going to do? I just plug a 4 into that quantity. 4 times 1/3 plus 0. My marginal cost of that fourth unit was 4/3 or 1.33 repeated. What was the marginal cost of the sixth unit? I plug a 6 in here, 6 times 1/3, I end up with what? 2, right? As I am going to higher and higher quantities, my marginal costs are increasing, right? And I can prove that to myself just plugging in different numbers using that linear supply equation. Any questions on this? Okay. So let's see. Is there anything else I want to say? We've already talked about the fact that they're increasing. I think we'll start here next class. We'll probably go through this pretty quick. Before you guys leave, we're going to try to troubleshoot this, which is why I'm kind of getting out a couple minutes early. So what would you like me to do? Just open it back up?